Time for our minute.
Yeah.
Awkwardly
Just
waiting.
have like a dance party.
We should do something
While we
during this
wait.
time. Unless we can figure out the actual,
Sign.
what?
We had the sign.
We had the sign.
All right,
But,
now I see it.
okay, is there now?
Yeah.
We have to make a new sign out of cardboard. We definitely can do that. That will not be too hard for us to do.
I know. We should do it. Yeah, when I'm
Making
with
that
you.
sign took like 10 seconds of effort.
Fantastic. It
For
looked like
people,
well,
it
no,
looked
it looked
like
like
it.
it. It looked like it. And that was like
For
its charm.
right? For people who are like, what are they talking about right now? For season 1, we had a cardboard sign that said the podcast will be starting soon. And then like a piece of like an Amazon box I just like ripped off one of the flaps for. It was
Big
jagged.
Sharpie. I
It
think there
was
was like
rough.
oil on it.
There's oil stains because I had a skin issue last winter, and so I had to keep putting vitamin E on my hands, and so vitamin E like fingerprints all over it. Yeah, it was
It was
rough,
so
but
charming. I
very
loved it.
charming. Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought that we moved with it. Like, I seriously thought I'd packed this up, and I was like,
No.
this is nostalgic. We need to keep this. It'll be in a museum someday, but I don't know if I did because I feel like I would have found it already after we moved.
When I was there last, I didn't see you. Or I didn't see it.
Yeah, I see. I feel like I would have been there.
Okay, hold on. I'm putting the book in the chat for anybody that is
Awesome.
following along. And I'm gonna pin it.
And feel free to. We have our Instagram community where you guys can comment your thoughts and takeaways from the chapter. Even if you do it after the fact, it's fine because everything is there. I'm gonna pull it up right now. So see how we have these thought bubbles. You can
Thought bubbles.
comment your thoughts on it.
Let's have a
That's what they are there
discussion.
for. Let's
Yeah.
do it.
All right. Welcome to Ignited.
Best podcast out there, where we
I was
leave
gonna
you
say.
feeling remoralized.
And re-energized. Oh my God.
And today we are looking at chapter 6 of Make Me, which is what I wasn't listening, the passive no of disengagement, which I think is something all of us educators can relate to. And now you're doing the first summary this week, right? We just talked about that.
Yep.
So let me get my timer going. All right. Are you ready?
Yeah, I think so.
Take us away, Britt. Let's hear it.
2 minutes. Okay. Chapter 6, What I Wasn't Listening, the passive no of disengagement. In this chapter, Eric Tashalis shoved a lot of information into this chapter. This was like a very info-packed chapter, covered a lot of different areas, but it all came back to the disengagement that we see in the classroom. And it starts off with defining disengagement as detaching, disconnecting, or withdrawing from the community or the classroom, the school. And then it outlined like all of the different ways we see disengagement. And for some of them, I didn't consider the specific behaviors that he defines as disengagement. I wouldn't have considered that disengagement, but he explained it so well. Oh my gosh, this book is so good. And at the end, I was like, okay, I could see these behaviors are like you'd consider them to be students who are disengaged. The first one was self-handicapping. So how students self-handicap to save face and to save social clout. Then your typical avoidance, right? I feel like that's what we always like label disengagement as, like, oh, they're avoiding. Then how he talked about how disengagement is commonly misunderstood and dismissed. The disengaged students are just kind of passed over. Then he talks about relativism and nihilism, like that relativism is like how the world works and how you relate to it, and nihilism is like just like why does anything matter. Narcissism, which was very interesting, and multitasking.
And that's time.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. I'll get my timer up.
Let's do it.
Okay, are you ready?
Let's do this. All right. So in chapter 6, what I wasn't listening, the passive no of disengagement, it talks about what disengagement is and like what's actually happening behind the surface. Because as educators, we see a kid who is disengaged, it can feel like the kid's like helpless or like they're stuck in like this cycle of hopelessness, and that can eventually lead us to feeling kind of hopeless. They're just feeling stuck, and that kid's always going to be that way. There's nothing we can do about it. But in this chapter, Deshalis proves that that's not the case. This is reversible, and he goes into reasons why and how this occurs. So like Brittany mentioned, one form of disengagement is self-handicapping, where you actually explain that one pretty well. So I'm gonna keep going. So self-handicapping, and then the other one was just avoidance, and how avoidance can relate or it can come from a variety of different reasons, but the kids still do it. Then it also talked about how we misunderstand or dismiss this withdrawal and why we do that. And that relates back to relativism and the nihilism. And then the narcissism, I feel like I'm trying to get like further. There's so much content here. Then the narcissism too is the reason why kids will withdraw from something. And multitasking is also a form of withdrawal and avoidance. And poor regulation. And then some ways that we can support kids through this is by having student-led parent-teacher conferences, providing kids not only with opportunity to share their voice, but also an opportunity to choose the ways in which they demonstrate their learning, and to create a safe space where kids can practice autonomy and they can learn and grow and risk take.
Boom.
All right. It's hard trying to get through everything. There's so much stuff. Like while I was turning pages, I was like, I could dive in
really
here
big.
so much. Like one of the really interesting sections to me in this chapter was the self-regulation and how it was broken into the 3 stages. So when we talk about self-regulation, people think like breathing exercises, right? But this is hard to say. Self-regulation, there's 3 different stages to it. And the first one is planning learning, which is when you're initiating your interests, setting goals, assessing the learning environment, preparing materials, clarifying expectations. Then there's controlling learning, which is when you're sustaining your focus, you're self-monitoring, you're adjusting, you're integrating feedback, you're managing distractions. And then finally, there's the reflecting on learning, which is when you're self-evaluating, you're attributing success to something, you're identifying areas need improvement, and you're projecting subsequent efforts. This all comes from page 139. But what's really cool about this is that the Deshalis breaks down how in each of these stages, what it would look like for a kid to be disengaged, and then how we can help them. So if you're like, yeah, it definitely seems like my kids struggle with starting things or completing it or finishing it or reflecting afterwards, take a look at page 139 through 140, 141, because it breaks down everything right there.
Yeah, and it's really important that you understand what self-regulation is. So you touched on it, that we're not talking about self-regulation as regulating the nervous system. What he's talking about is regulating your executive functioning. And so he says that sustaining, or process of initiating, sustaining, and reflecting is self-regulation. So when we do this as teachers, we tend not to model it unless you have a really, really good grasp of your habits, of like you have been working in front of kids for a long time, so you are like calm, cool, and collected. You are not dealing with behaviors like, but modeling how we think through things, how we reflect, how we plan. That's so important because nobody models self-regulation, like executive functioning self-regulation. I feel like we're hitting hard that the mindfulness, breathing, controlling our nervous system, like because those stop those big behaviors. But if we focused on self-regulation of executive functioning just as much as we did of self-regulation of the nervous system, that we would see a huge decrease in behaviors, because a lot of those behaviors are coming from like lack of feeling competent,
Mm-hmm.
like, and we should be teaching those executive functioning skills because and modeling them, because it's that self-regulation, it's just not developmentally appropriate for a lot of our students to have, especially our neurodivergent kids.
Yeah. And all of our kids, like
Yeah.
everybody, like they're not going to have that be fully developed. I was talking to
Well,
a.
oh,
Go
I just
ahead.
want to say so like typically your ADHD kids tend to
Mm-hmm.
be 3 years behind
Yeah,
developmentally. So that's why. Yeah.
makes
Well,
sense. But I feel like we also sometimes get caught up too in thinking that our kids think and process things the way we do, especially when we have the
mhm.
older kids, right? And
Mhm.
they're like as big as you are, but they're not processing things the same way. And I think this book is really good about going back and telling you that, like, hey, they might look like adults, but they're not there yet.
Right. And he said it specifically, like he said, we often think that we often think because kids are capable of thinking like adults,
Yep.
they'll behave like adults. And that's that's not true. Just because they have the capability of thinking like um more abstractly doesn't mean that it's going to be their first response to think that way, first of all.
Oh, this might be a bad metaphor, or maybe
Okay,
not.
let's hear
But
it.
when I was in grad school, one of the things that really intrigued me is I forget where it came from, but talked about how what's really interesting with teaching is how you'll have a first year teacher, a freshman of college, and a veteran teacher who's been teaching for 30 years who have the same exact job.
Mhm.
Whereas in other industries, you might have more
Mm.
responsibilities added as you move up.
Mhm.
Like there's more entry level, and you get the basics
Mhm.
first, and then you keep going.
Mhm.
But when you're a brand new teacher, you're figuring everything out all
Mhm.
at once. And so I also kind of feel like it's expecting like a first year teacher to have the same toolbox
Mhm.
as you expect a teacher of 30 years, even though they look the same, like they're both teachers, they both might be
Yeah.
teaching fourth grade,
Yep.
entirely different skill set that they're bringing into things.
So that's why I mentioned specifically like you're able to regulate yourself in the classroom,
Mm-hmm.
because modeling self-regulation, like executive functioning self-regulation techniques, that's going to depend on whether you have your executive functioning.
Yeah.
And if you are in fight or flight, you're overwhelmed, you're anxious, you're
This
overworried.
is the same conversation I had last night with the member, and let's not do that again.
Mhm.
Talking about this. Yeah, you're not going to be able to access your executive functioning. I
Yeah.
talked about too how, in education, we spend so much time thinking about the kids and doing everything for the kids,
Mhm.
which makes sense. But the teachers are what faces the kids. And so we
Mhm.
have to pour into the teachers and teach them how to do these things. If a teacher is not regulated,
Mhm.
they're not going to be able to create a calm and joyful environment where learning thrives and kids feel safe.
So I have the Meet the Needs workshop series, which is all about stress regulation for teachers. And I had somebody ask me like, "Well, you were, creating content for neurodivergent teachers and neurodivergent students, and like how does this relate?"
Mm-hmm.
And which was really bold, but whatever. I'm like,
People are
"Okay."
so bold.
You
People
know
are so
what?
bold in the
I'll
DS.
answer this. Okay. So uh my thought process was like I have these strategies in the toolkit, right? Like there's, it's got a lot of strategies. You could totally use it. It's fantastic if I do say so myself. However, the issue is that teachers aren't regulated enough to use the strategies, because the stress response clouds your thinking process so much.
Yes.
So you can't, like, I could give you all the strategies in the world, but if you can't calm yourself down and be able to access a peer,
yeah, and this is exactly it. Like, this is why, like, in my course too, let's not do that again. Like, it's 4 modules, right? And it's about like helping teachers fill their toolbox strategies to manage behavior. But module 1, module 2, and the beginning of module 3 is all about the teacher. And like all about you as a person and things that you do. Only like halfway through module 3 do we actually start talking about addressing the behavior.
Yeah, it's
And
so
that's
much
how
inner
it
work.
is. Yeah.
So let's get to quotes. You want to do quotes?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay.
You have yours ready to go?
Yes, I do.
Let's hear it.
132. Okay. So when I said yes, I do, I lied. 132. 133, 132.
Okay, I have mine ready to go.
All right.
I love
Go ahead.
just the ownership of that.
Yeah.
Okay. So mine is from page 131, very close to where you are currently on your search.
Yes. I found it.
And this is from the section about avoidance. So it says that familiarity and positive relationships are associated with greater help seeking, like help seeking from kids to teachers. Moreover, teachers' concerns about the social and emotional well-being of their students was related to less help avoidance. I'm going to read that one more time.
Yeah.
Teachers' concerns about the social and emotional well-being of their students was related to less help avoidance, particularly for students who doubted their own ability to successfully do their own academic work. Findings such as these suggest that the social emotional aspects of teaching can be just as critical as, if not more so than, the content being taught. End quote. Drop book.
Boom.
And
that was a really good quote.
Wasn't it? It was. It's this whole chapter, this whole book. Honestly, it's like entirely pink highlighter. I was showing Brittany before, but there's so much pink highlighter going on.
Everything's important.
Exactly. Everything's important. Everything should be capitalized.
Everything.
But for this, like, I don't know how many times I've heard teachers or talked to teachers who are like, well, I teach academics and I didn't sign up to be a therapist or to be this child's mother or whatever. But you won't actually teach and achieve your job if you don't attend to social emotional needs or care about that. And I think this is like I don't know if I would call it a double-edged sword, but it's hard because as teachers too, if you don't understand withdrawal and what's happening, when the kid's refusing to do their work, it can be so triggering. And so then you might want, if you were like me, a dictator, you might want to slap the kid with a punishment because how dare they not do the thing that you told them to do? When what the kid really needs just for you to give a damn.
Right.
And to like recognize where they are social emotionally and then help them through.
Yes. I I'm gonna say that if you are in education and you do not value the relational aspect of learning, then if you do not value that, if you find it to be like irritating, then I think that you should, if you want to stay in education, then you need to not work in front of students. I just said it. Dang. But like it needs to be called out because too many students, especially the marginalized students, end up getting neglected or dang near abused. And at some point we have to own that.
We have to own that, period.
Yeah. But back to the relational aspect of teaching and learning. Learning is relational. You're relating the content to your your world, your culture, your experience. And in the moment of learning, the more connected you are, the more you feel like you belong, the more engaged the brain is. If the student does not feel like they belong, if the student does not feel like they belong, that is a compromised need that is going to set off the fight or flight and is going to lead to maladaptive behavior.
So much stuff that we say. Like I just want to get like a megaphone, like throw
Right.
books.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
read research.
Right. Yes, like you have to. You have to. You wouldn't want a doctor that is using practices 20 years ago.
Someday what we'll have to do, Brittany, is like you and I will have to form like our mini parade series where we just go to different schools and like start yelling like change the system, or actually maybe it's better
like a riot.
to go to the Capitol, teaching to a riot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Man,
we have to I get so fired up.
I know.
When even doing a live Q&A call last night, we were talking about rewards and punishments, and let's not do that again. And I just go off, even making my modules in module 1. I try to keep module 1 a bit shorter. It's weird, 15-minute videos, get you used to these topics. For the rewards and punishment ones, I just go off.
Yep.
4 times the duration. I was like, I can't get anything out.
Welcome to Let's Not Do That Again.
I think at the end of the video, I'm like, well, I tried to make this one a bit shorter, but as you can see, that did not work.
No,
there's so much stuff that we have to learn and then unlearn.
Yeah, yeah. We have to unlearn a lot. And a lot has to do with psychology, like the neurology behind learning. And that needs to be taught, and it's not being taught to teachers.
Yeah.
So, but you know what?
We are.
Yeah, that's true. I was gonna say we should go to the universities, and that's where we should.
We could bring our parade riot there.
Yeah, but then
let us know if you would like for us to show up to university and put on a parade riot. It will be solely us walking through the green with megaphones.
Yes.
Well, you're welcome to join.
I like that. Yeah.
We can get Meg for Meg comes to behavior. Yeah.
Yes.
Meg will bring her sparkles. Yeah.
Glitter. Yeah. Sequins.
She already probably has enough megaphones for all of us.
Probably. Yeah. Some noisemakers.
Exactly. I mean, we will be the noisemakers. We might not need anything additional.
That's where I thrive. Okay. So
what is your quote? You found it now, right?
Right. Yes, I did. Okay, so when we de-emphasize, sorry, this is from page 132. When we de-emphasize grades and highlight learning, recognize understanding and minimize correctness, remain critical without being cruel or sarcastic, and portray errors as signs of efforts, not incompetence. And I'm going to end it there because that was a lot. But we need to de-emphasize grades. Boom.
Yeah.
And we need to be highlighting the mastery, not the performance. We need to be focusing on mastery. We need to be highlighting the learning. That's what kids should be focused on, not what grade do I have, not what points did I get. Did I lose any points? What did you learn? Tell me that. That's what I want to know. Recognize understanding and minimize correctness. So understanding is constructed, right? Yes, we want the kids to know the correct information, but we don't want them to just regurgitate it. Yeah. We want them to adopt that information into their understanding of the world. So we need to emphasize understanding. Then remain critical without being cruel or sarcastic. And this goes back to regulation.
Yeah.
You won't be cruel or sarcastic if you are calm, collected, and can problem solve in the classroom. You'll be optimistic. And portray errors as signs of effort. Failure is a part of learning, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I know that the brain is like very adverse to failing, because like failing, especially the brain is averse to failing here in America, because we have made failing like a part of being ostracized from the community. So like we
Yes.
push failures away, the way we use the language of failing. Like
Yeah.
we definitely created this idea of failing means that you're going to end up alone. And
We
that
say
is
those things. Like I had a teacher who was like, if you don't pass the skill of a job like working at McDonald's and stuff like that. I'm like,
mhm,
in high school hearing this stuff.
yeah.
And that's also like a conversation we had last night too, because one of the teachers on there, and like I understand because like I was in that position years ago too, was
Mhm,
like I just expected like kids would behave like how I behaved when I was in school
mhm,
because that's just what we did. And school has never been equitable. It
no,
has never served the communities, everybody.
no,
It has
no.
never been able to help every society.
Mm-mm.
So, like, even this school that we may have seen, or you may have seen that you're like, oh, well, it worked. Like, the behavior was fine. People learned and it worked. Like, you're just looking at such a minute fraction of what's actually happening in the world.
Mhm,
Because, yeah, maybe that part of the wheel was working, but
mhm.
the rest of it's falling apart.
Oh yeah. That's really good. Yeah,
And
I
I
like
was
that.
thinking of another metaphor because I don't know, my head's just there. It's like
Metaphors.
when you're trying to like bake like a tiered cake,
Mhm.
and like the bottom's like really wobbly, and then the top part's also really wobbly. Like eventually, the entire thing's going to just crumble in on itself, and we're in the crumbling season.
Yes. Yeah. And okay, so let's end on a hopeful note.
Okay.
Okay, so
uh,
I will say that in order to fix a problem, you have to recognize that it's happening, because this has been happening,
True.
like you said, it's been happening for since public education was created in America. What was that, like 18?
I would even say before then, because even before then, education wasn't equitable.
Oh yeah. Well, before then, education was only like given to a certain class of people. So yeah,
Yes, also not equitable.
not equitable is like an understatement. Like, but okay, so but we tend to think like, oh, public education, like a public education, it's equitable. I don't know who actually believes that. Like,
We could
like you?
probably find some people. If this video gets enough views, they'll come to the comments.
Oh, good. Yeah. Okay. So so public education was, in America anyway, it was designed to produce lower middle class factory working positions.
I want to try to find that quote because it's also from here.
Yeah, yeah. So you have you have that, you have Paulo Freire, um and the education of the oppressed class, I believe the book is called. It's a really good book. Um but it's it is well documented that public education in America was designed for, they call it social stratification. You're
Do you
not
want
going
the
to.
quote?
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
found it
All
from
right.
page 21, and this was said by President Woodrow Wilson when he was addressing New York City High School Teachers Association. And he was the president of Princeton University then, I think. Maybe not, though. Anyways, it says, we want to do two things in modern society. We want one class of persons to have a liberal education, and we want another class of persons, a very much larger class, of necessity in every society, to forego the privileges of a liberal education and fit themselves to perform specific difficult manual tasks. Um, and then skip a little bit down further. It says, we are either trying to make liberally educated persons out of them, or we are trying to make skillful servants of society along mechanical lines, or else we do not know what we are trying to do. And that's our
Boom.
positive note for you.
I
We hope you
forgot
feel
we were trying to do
remoralized and re-energized.
Re-energized. Okay, so, but where I was originally going with that, okay, was that we've been doing it for this way for so long. Like since the beginning of, when America started public education. So now we're starting to uncover these inequities. We are not starting to uncover these inequities. I was going to say that was a white thing to say. But it's true. Okay, so we have known about these inequities for a really long time. I think now because of the advancement of technology and the advancement of social media, it's coming to more and more people's attention, and more stories are being told. Also, there's more like a bigger highlight on like what's going on in the schools because it's being recorded.
That's true.
Yeah. So we are in a perfect position to start taking like action to move education forward so that it is equitable. Because if we don't start equitably educating everybody in America, we're going to have some issues. And I think that we're seeing those issues unfold societally, socially. So let's go.
Is that your action step?
Well, my action step, yeah, I think I feel like my action step is always to emphasize, or not emphasize, but like lift up voices of marginalized populations, and students who are in those inequitable situations. We need to make sure we're amplifying their voices and their stories. We need to make sure that we're doing the inner work to unlearn and to regulate ourselves in the classroom, and to be as empathetic and as community driven as possible. And we need to have high standards for our kids, but at the same time, with the same amount of focus and enthusiasm, we have to hold space for them as human beings and not cogs in a machine. That's my action step.
I like it.
Thanks.
Mine's a bit shorter and sweeter. Maybe not. It's not sweeter. It's just shorter. You're very sweet.
Thanks.
But mine is just next time you look at withdrawal, I want you, instead of looking at the behavior, to look at the kid. And I want you to try to understand and think, okay, what could possibly be going on here? Especially if you're like trying to break out of maybe like a more dictatorish cycle, or like some rough classroom management routines, expectations. It starts with you. So start rewiring the way that you look at kids, especially when they're saying, no, I'm not going to do my assignment, but they put their head down.
Yep.
All right. Well, that is this chapter. So we'll be back again next week for what chapter do we have next week?
Chapter 7.
Chapter 7. That's not fair. Why indignation is better than resignation. So we'll be back with that one next week. And in the meantime, we hope that you feel remoralized
and re-energized.
And now that's a better note to end on.
Bye.